Do you know how many adults, though, have told me that I stopped singing because an adult somewhere told me that I shouldn't sing, that I wasn't any good? And that makes me so crazy because lots of little kids don't know how to do it. If you don't grow up in a singing family, a
Right.
lot of kids can't naturally carry a pitch or stay on tune with a song.
Right.
And so it's
Yeah.
something that they have to be exposed to and do a whole lot.
Welcome to Story Power, a bi-monthly podcast where my guests and I geek out about the stories we are passionate about in all different genres, styles, and formats. And we'll give a few recommendations to you, our listeners. Beware, possible spoilers ahead. My name is Lucinda Sage-Midgorden, and I started this podcast during the COVID-19 pandemic. As I watched the reaction of my social media circle, I noticed that many people turned to stories for comfort and help in making sense of the craziness going on around them. And as all good stories do, the world got even crazier. But, as Neil Gaiman says, fairy tales are more than true not because they tell us that dragons exist, but because they tell us that dragons can be beaten. Since I believe that stories have the power to show us the way and give us courage to keep going, I wanted to see if that was true for my guests as well. Today, I'm recording episode 19, and I'm talking with Cindy Midgorden, my sister-in-law. Her husband, Mark, and my husband, Barry, are brothers, and we've known each other for a very long time. And Cindy, you and I were just talking about how we met. Can you relate the story? Because unfortunately, I do not remember how that happened, how we met.
So I think that it was at a restaurant called Pumpernicks. It was a kind of a deli type restaurant in South Kansas City. We had gone to Mark and Barry's father, John's voice recital. Mark and I had with his dad and his mom. And then we drove down and met you and Barry at the restaurant.
Oh, wow. Okay. Man, I do not remember that. But I tend to jettison information that I don't think I need. And then later, I'm sorry about that.
I remember weird things that really I have no need for, but it just sticks in my head.
I do that too. Well, and you and Mark had already been dating for a long time because I think Barry told me that, or maybe you told me that you had been dating since you were in high school. Is that right?
Yes, we started dating our senior year of high school it would have been January of 1979. Wow. And actually we were concert choir folder partners. The director needed a bass and an alto to share a folder. And so Mark and I volunteered. And at that point, we really didn't know each other at all. And so we kind of got to know each other through the fall. And then we started dating in the winter when we were working on a musical. The musical was Carnival. And Mark was a roustabout and I was the rehearsal accompanist.
Oh.
That's when we really started dating.
Oh, wow. That's so cool. So when I met you, I think you had already started at KU, if I remember correctly.
Yeah. So I went to KU for right out of high school, and Mark went to Graceland for a year. And then I lured him to KU with me. So
yes. Yeah. Well, of course, you got to follow your love, right?
I think so, but you know.
Yeah. Okay. So I remember 79 is the year that I graduated from Graceland with my first degree. And then when I was waiting for Barry, I added theater and speech. So yeah. Okay. That gives me perspective. Oh, my goodness. That was a long time ago.
It was a long time ago.
So I have, I'm sort of stupid. I like to sit back when we're at the family gatherings and just listen to people talk and watch and observe because I'm an introvert. And so I've never asked you, what was it that got you started loving music?
I'm not really sure. I just know that from the time I was little, that was the part that I loved about church. I loved the singing in Bible school, all the little songs with motions. I just really loved that. And when I was in 4th or 5th grade, I started this campaign begging my parents for a piano because I really wanted piano lessons. My very best friend had taken piano from the time she was little, and I would go to her house and she would teach me little songs to play. And so I didn't even start piano lessons till I was in 6th grade. And I just loved it. And I practiced constantly. So I surpassed my friend in a short time because I just worked at it all the time. And so all through junior high and high school, I accompanied choirs, I sang in choirs. Those were the classes that I just really loved. They just kind of spoke to me. And so it seemed like a natural progression. And then when I was in high school, I started talking with my choir director about possible music careers and started looking into music therapy, actually.
Mm-hmm.
And that was my first music degree. And so I just kind of decided that I went to the University of Kansas and they paired in their music department. I was the last class that they allowed to double major in music ed and music therapy. And it just made sense to me because then I could go a lot of different ways with it career-wise, and it still let me use my love of music. And so, I don't know, it just kind of jumped off from there. And I did work as a music therapist for 5 years when I first got out of school. But then when we moved back to Independence, I decided I wanted to try the education part of my degree. And so I got a job in an elementary school and just fell in love. And so that's where I stayed and finished my career. Although I do think the music therapy aspect side of it really made me a much better music teacher because I learned to look at children differently and just, meeting needs and helping them love it no matter where they were or what their limitations were. And I'm not sure I would have had that same focus if I hadn't had the therapy background. So I think it was a very natural pairing.
Yes, I was thinking that too. Because actually, I think teachers should take psychology classes and maybe classes to learn how to be a therapist, because there are so many children who need someone to hear them and to see them and to listen to them and to encourage them. And sometimes some teachers don't know how to do that. Yeah. And maybe if they had some background in psychology or therapy of some sort, it might really help them be better teachers.
I do think there are, like most music degrees do require some psychology, but the therapy part of it, it makes you look at, like, I use music as a tool to meet the need of the child, which is a very different perspective than a music educator. Music educator, you're trying to teach about music, and that was not at all the goal of music therapy. And so I think it just helps you kind of see things from all angles, and it really lets you look at what is the need of this kid. And yes, my goal as a music teacher was to teach them about music, but at the same time, some kids don't start there. You have to use it to hook them and to let them see the possibilities and then move them into the education realm. And or for some kids, because they don't call it Down syndrome now, but at the time they did. I had a lot of Down syndrome children, and their goals are just very different. And so later in my career, when I was integrating those children into the regular music classroom, it didn't take a lot of extra thinking effort on my part to figure out, okay, this child doesn't really have a place in their life to know about scales. So how can I take this activity that I'm doing with everybody else and make it apply to them and make it meaningful for them? So you've got all these different levels that are going on at the same time. And I just feel like that extra training made that an easier process for me. I think good teachers do that all the time, but I think it just became a part of who I was because I'd had that extra training.
Yeah, some people just do it instinctively.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't know about you, but sometimes I would watch my theater students. Well, it was drama when I was teaching high school. That's what they called it. But I would watch them, start to see the world in a different way. And then I would watch them blossom. And I'm sure you had that same kind of experience.
Yeah. There were lots of times when you would teach a kid. One of my very favorite memories, the Kansas City Symphony used to bring instruments into classrooms, and they called it an instrument petting zoo. And I have this very vivid memory of this little tiny first grader. I think his name was Quentin, and he literally could not have been 3.5 feet tall in first grade. He was tiny, and he wanted to learn to play the trombone. And he would pick up, and they were awesome. They would let the kids pick them up, try to play them however they could. They gave a little instruction, but basically it was just be creative. How could you play this instrument? And he would not let go of that trombone. He played and played and played. And when he was in high school, he invited me to one of their symphony concerts. And I went and watched him play. And sure enough, he was playing the trombone. And so just seeing a desire awaken in them when they're little and then watch them fulfill it when they got into high school was just so much fun. And I had a student that I love that wrote me a letter years later that she became a music teacher. And it was just the nice things that she wrote about the influence that I'd had on her life and how it just awakened this desire to share that with other kids. It's just, those are the moments that are very fulfilling and very fun.
Yes. Oh, yes. I agree. Because I have students even now from college who are continuing on with theater or movie making in some way or something. And it's like, oh, that's so nice.
That's my baby.
I'm so excited for them,
Yes.
Yeah, it's really
Somebody
great.
was listening.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I was wondering if you are involved still in music, even though you're retired now. Do you teach music lessons, or I know you sing in the choir at church?
I do. Right now under COVID, we haven't been having any large group choir things. And honestly, I have not played in a long time, but before COVID, I played regularly for worship services and special services. And in fact, went occasionally to a couple of other churches around town to fill in when their accompanists needed to be gone. And I love that. I love playing with the band and just that creativity and then the worship music. And then I also teach piano lessons. Right now I have, I can't remember, I lose count, 14 or 15 piano students of various ranges from beginners all the way up to a couple in high school. And I really like that. I love working one-on-one with kids and finding out as they get past the basics, now what kind of music do you want to play and how can we work on that and meet your goals? So I do have a couple of kids that are learning to play praise music the way I do at church, cool. Just off of chord sheets instead of actually reading music, and just things like that. So I'm still doing a lot with music and I love it. It's just part of who I am.
Oh, yes, I think so, because I loved it when we went to see you singing in the choir at Christmas time. And that is one of the things about church that I really loved was the music. I remember taking piano lessons when I was taking voice lessons in college, and the piano teacher said, "Did you ever think that piano wasn't your instrument?" And I just had to laugh, because the reason I was taking it was because the voice instructor said, you need to be able to learn to play these songs for yourself to help you. And after a semester or two, I realized, well, I can sing in a choir, but music is not really my thing. I like music, but
adults. Do you know how many adults though have told me that I stopped singing because an adult somewhere told me that I shouldn't sing, that I wasn't any good. And that makes me so crazy, because lots of little kids don't know how to do it. If you don't grow up in a singing family, a lot of kids can't naturally carry a pitch or stay on tune with a song. Right. And so it's something that they have to be exposed to and do a whole lot. Right. And so it hurts my heart when I hear adults say that, well, I stopped because an adult told me I couldn't sing.
Yeah. Like, no. Well, I didn't stop singing, but because I have a good ear and I'm not very good at reading music, but I can hear it and then replicate it. But yes, I totally understand that as well, because I always start all my classes with everyone can be a good actor. You're doing it all the time. You're one person at work, you're one person at home, and to see the relief on the students' faces, because, acting they're taking it because they need fine art credit. Right. Some of them. But, and they wanted to kind of try it, but to hear me say, everyone can be a good actor. You may not be Meryl Streep, but you can be a good actor. And the relief on their faces, it's like, oh yeah, okay, maybe I can do this.
I have been known to tell a child, there's always a kid in every group that sings really loudly and really off key. So I have been known to say, right now I want you to sing softly and blend in and listen carefully to the kids around you. Mm-hmm. Because usually but I would do that privately, not in front of a group. And if they would do that, a lot of them would get better. I would have kids that would join my 5th grade choir. And I always had an audition. So I knew what I was getting. Mm-hmm. But anybody that auditioned could be in. And I would always try to stand the kids that didn't sing as well, sandwich them between kids who did really well. And I would say to that child, okay, this is where you're good. this is what you need to work on. And I want you to listen really hard to the people beside you and just sing softly until you can tell you're matching them. And some of those kids didn't ever show improvement, but a lot of them really would get much better because they had never really thought about singing as something that you had to listen. And you do have to be a good listener to be able to blend in with a group. And I don't know, they all come to choir thinking that they're Miley Cyrus or whoever was popular at the time. They can sing whatever songs, and it's
yes,
their perspective. Yes. But you can help them get better.
Yes, that's great. And it's an avocation, or I guess that's the word, something that you can do that you love, a hobby, but you don't have to be a professional singer. It's just something that you can do for fun.
Yes.
Something.
And that was for me, that was always the goal of music education. I don't care that they can play every scale on the piano. I don't care that they know about all of the composers, because you can look those things up on the internet. What I care about is instilling a love in them that makes them want to do it for themselves, because it's something, I wanted to see little kids growing up to join the city orchestra, or Independence has a great city orchestra, or church choirs, or just going home from a long day at work and playing the guitar for yourself. Because I feel like that's the power of music, the ability to make you more human, make you experience emotion, stress relief, all of those good things that music does for you. That's the goal. It's to help them not just do something in elementary school, but to want to do it their whole lives. Right. And so that was always kind of my focus. What can we, for the kids that we never found something that caught them, I spent a lot of their time in 4th and 5th grade. Okay, what aspect of music do you want to learn about? Trying to hook them and get them before my time with them was through.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's fantastic. I love that. Because I know people who just love to go home and play the piano for themselves, to either vent out their feelings of the day or to soothe themselves. Yeah. And they play some sort of, and sometimes it's just recorded music that they listen to, but if they play an instrument, there's a really neat, while you were talking, I was thinking of this movie that Barry and I watched recently. It has Morgan Freeman in it, and he moves he's house sitting on the East Coast someplace near a lake, and he is a paraplegic, but the woman next door has 3 daughters, and she plays the piano. It's called The Magic of Belle Isle. He's a writer, but he hasn't written anything in a while because when his wife died, he was so devastated by that because she was the inspiration for his writing. They were married. He was a baseball player, I think. And right when he got signed, the day he got signed onto the majors, he was in a car accident and he was in a wheelchair from then on. So this whole thing about the woman playing the piano in the evening, and it's summertime, so the windows are open and he can hear her playing. Something about the playing and the music that she chooses helps him heal, because up until that time, he's drinking a lot, and meeting the family and them sort of embracing him. It's just this wonderful movie that has kind of music as part of the center of the movie, and you might really like it.
Yeah, I'll have to look for it. You had me at Morgan Freeman. I love
Morgan. Yeah. And Virginia Madsen plays the mom. And one of the daughters wants to be a writer, and she just keeps bugging him until he says, "Okay, I'll help you learn how to be a writer." So it's like they sort of worm their way into his life. I just love it. It's such a great movie.
I'll have to look for it. It sounds good.
So do you have any favorite styles of music or composers or bands, or what's your favorite kinds of music? And maybe it's leveled.
I'm very eclectic. Yeah. So for classical composers, I love Aaron Copland. I just love the openness, the beauty of his music, and the idea that it was written and inspired by things that he had seen. He was really kind of like Stephen Foster. So he reminds me a lot of a composer like Stephen Foster, where they take cultural things and turn it into beautiful music. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's what I love about him. I love a lot. I listen to a lot of Christian music, a lot of Christian bands. Mark and I love James Taylor. I think that my love of James Taylor came from him because that's his favorite composer of all time.
Yeah.
So
we like him too.
Anytime James Taylor is within driving distance of Kansas City, we go to his concerts.
That's great.
So we love him. But I also like certain kinds of country. I like Carrie Underwood. I listen to a lot of different things. And I have kids that will come and bring me things that they've been listening to. I have an 8th grader right now that's working on learning to play. She plays really well by ear, and she's writing some of her own things. And so she'll bring me just snippets of songs. And so I think I'm pretty all over the board with listening. Yeah. Probably mostly I would say to James Taylor or to Christian contemporary music.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Yeah.
Matthew West and people like that.
Who?
Matthew West is one of my favorites.
Matthew West. Okay. Yeah. I'm asking because I want to put it in the show notes. Yeah. We love Copland too. And that's why we chose a Copland piece for our wedding.
I remember that's one of my favorites.
I love that whole Tenderland Suite is one of my favorite pieces of music.
I'm looking at my artist list here. I like Beach Boys. Beach Boys was one of my original when I was in junior high. I can remember having dance, like slumber parties at the house, and we would dance to Beach Boys albums, specifically Endless Summer. And so I still have that album, but there's a skip on it because a skip through several of the songs because we would be dancing and jumping and so it would skip across. So now if you try to play that album, it skips across in places. It's so funny. I love that.
That is great. Yes. Good memories. It brings back good memories.
Yeah.
Oh, I love it.
I love Jim Brookman. He's strictly piano, and I love his music. It's just gorgeous. I have bought several of his books thinking that perhaps I can play like he does and I can't, but it doesn't stop me from trying.
Well, that's right. And besides, you're just playing it for yourself anyway.
Exactly. Rascal Flatts is a country group that I like a lot. Sidewalk Prophets is the name of a Christian band that I really like. Jonathan actually got me turned on to them. In fact, the music director at my church and 2 of his really good friends have a band that's kind of up and coming called Summit Road. And anything they write is wonderful. You can find it on iTunes. They're really good.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, I could go on and on. I'm looking down through my list going, oh yeah, I like them and I like them and I like them.
Well, that's okay. You can keep recommending because I'll put them in the show notes and then people can go listen.
There's a group called We Are Messengers. It's a Christian rock group that I like, 10th Avenue North. Probably my all-time favorite is Stephen Curtis Chapman.
Oh, I think I've heard of him.
He's a Christian artist. Started doing a lot of things. Oh, so have you heard of the group Pentatonics?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Oh my gosh, I love Pentatonics and I love the Piano Guys. Have you seen anything by the Piano Guys?
Barry has. We have music from both of those. Yeah.
Oh, I love them. Love them. Love them.
Yeah.
There is a jazz kind of blues group from the Kansas City area called the Pat Metheny group.
Oh,
they're really good too. I don't know how readily available they would be on iTunes or anything, but they're good. And then I like, the old classics. I like Kenny Loggins.
Mm-hmm.
One of my favorite was John Denver and the Muppets.
Oh, yes, right. I love that too.
Yeah, I just love John Denver. And then there's a group out of Australia called Hillsong United. I like them. Oh, Bruce Hornsby and the Range. He is a group that was from the maybe 80s and 90s, but he sounds a whole lot like Aaron Copland. I mean, it's the same type of music. I mean, it's country, but it's, I don't know. There's just something about their styles that one makes me think of the other.
Nice.
So those are probably my biggest favorite list.
That's great. Because I can put that in the show notes. I'm hoping people will go listen. I might listen to some of them too, because I don't know all of them.
Well, definitely Summit Road.
Summit Road. Okay, I will. That sounds fantastic.
Yeah, they're really good.
So do you have any I'm going to move to books and movies and TV. Sure. And do you have any recommendations or things that you really like? Books or movies or TV that you really like?
Oh, I wrote a whole list. I don't know how much you want. So I'll start with books. The most recent books that I've read that I really liked were Little Fires Everywhere which is also a limited series on Hulu, and both are very, very, very good.
Mm-hmm.
I liked also Where the Crawdads Sing. I'm not sure who the author is, but if you Google that, it'll pop up pretty quickly. It's on a bestseller list right now. And I really enjoyed that. That was very good. But I'm pretty all over the place with my reading too, because I also like Jodi Picoult books.
Uh-huh.
And I think her books, like my two most favorites of hers are My Sister's Keeper, which was turned into a movie, and then Song of the Humpback Whale. And I think I like her books because those were the first books that I really read that were like chapter by chapter, a change in perspective. Mm-hmm. And Song of the Humpback Whale, it even starts, there are three main characters, and two of them are telling the story. Like the first chapter is by one person, the second chapter is by another person. The third chapter is by a third character, but that character's story starts at the end of the story and works its way forward. So you know how the story ends and begins at the same time. What's interesting is how they cross over in the middle and then the different perspectives. And I love that about her writing. It's just a very different way to approach it. And I think it's really, really interesting.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, I love that. And then, my one that I read, you ask about things that I read over and over again, and I love Gone with the Wind. I mean, I just like period things in movies. I like Downton Abbey. I like Gone with the Wind. I like things that are from another time period. Mm-hmm. Whether or not they're terribly accurate, I don't know, but I do like them. And then from the time I was little, I liked all of the Little House on the Prairie books and the Laura Ingalls Wilder series.
Yes, I like those too.
Well, and even now there's a book out called Caroline, Little House Revisited, and it's by an author named Sarah Miller. But it goes back and it revisits Little House on the Prairie from Caroline's perspective, the mother, mm-hmm. which, all the other books are told from Laura's perspective. So I even now as an adult, I like to go. We went down to they have a museum in Mansfield, Missouri. And we went down and went all through the museum, and I got to see Pa's actual fiddle and the little china doll that stood on the shelf and all of the stories and in the books. And I don't know, there's something about that pioneer stuff that just calls to me. So now, like when this Caroline book came out, of course I had to get it and listen to it or read it because I love all things Little House on the Prairie. So.
Oh, that sounds interesting.
Yeah, it's really good. And then, I like all of the things that everybody else is probably reading. I love the Harry Potter books. I love the Game of Thrones books. Although I have to admit, I didn't get all the way through Game of Thrones. Once the books and the movies diverged, I was more into the movies than I never finished the book series. Mm-hmm. My all-time favorite book is a children's book by Robert Munsch, and it's the Love You Forever book.
Oh, right. I know that book.
Oh, it's mm-hmm. You need to get it and read it. It is.
I know it. Yeah.
A delightful book. And I read that to my kids when we were little. When they graduated from high school, I gave them a copy for each of them. And then now when our friends have babies, I always give a book to each new baby that's mm-hmm. just theirs. And I just love the story and the family and the traditions that are in it. It's just, I don't know, really to my heart. So
I was working in child development centers and Montessori schools and daycare centers, I would read that book to that. I knew a lot about children's books way back then because, people would donate books to the center and then I would read the books to the children. And that was a neat one.
Well, and I would do a lot of, when I was teaching elementary music, I would take books and turn them into sound stories. So Robert Munsch also has a great book called Mortimer. And uh-huh. Mortimer is a little boy that never wants to go to bed and he's very noisy. And so we would turn that into a sound story where each kid got an instrument to play and they played. The thing that's good about Robert Munsch is he has very repetitive lines throughout his books. Mm-hmm. And so, each kid had a certain line or a certain part to play. And so it was really fun to make those storybooks. We tried to connect literature and music as much as I could and turn those into songs, which was really fun. So I'm a big fan of Robert Munsch. There is also, I don't know if this is a series that you've ever heard about or not. And I think I found the author finally. So there are 3 books one is called Those Miller Girls. Let's see, Those Miller Girls, The Motoring Millers, and Does Anyone Care About Luema Miller? And it's by a lady named Alberta Wilson Constant. And it's written in the time period, like in the very early 1900s when in Eastern Kansas, so not very far away from here. Maybe that was the draw for me, when her dad was the first in the county to get an automobile, and he was a professor, and just, I loved those books. I read those over and over and over again. And then when Sarah was in elementary school, we read those together at night. So I like those a lot.
Oh, that's fun. Are they like middle grade books?
Maybe upper elementary.
Oh, uh-huh.
With the subject matter kind of stuff. There is a new author at Kansas City Metro in Lee Summit. Her name is Denise Grover Swank. I don't know if you've heard of her. The very first series she wrote is called the Curse Keeper series. There are 3 of them. And it kind of reminds me, I don't know if you remember that Eddie Murphy movie called The Golden Child, so it's kind of similar to that. There's a little boy that kind of has magical powers in the universe that is just starting to learn about that. And it's about the people that are trying to protect him from the evil side. So it's kind of a sci-fi mystery kind of thing. But she also writes romance novels and series and then other mystery kind of series. She's really good. She's kind of an up-and-coming writer to read her books.
Neat.
Yeah, and then I also read things like, I get a lot of things out of the church library. There's an author, her name is Kim Bogle Sawyer, and she's a Christian writer here in Kansas, and I read a lot of her books. But then I also read, like I read Becoming by Michelle Obama, and I loved that. I also have A Promised Land by Barack that I haven't read yet, but I have it on my list. So I'm kind of all over the place with my reading as well. I go from fiction to mystery to biographies, just kind of everywhere.
Well, I do that too. And it's like one book will lead to the next book, or I'll hear it on some podcast, what should I read next is the podcast I listen to. And I have to put that on my list. And then, yes, the episode, my episode with Virginia that aired today, she is reading all of the Pulitzer Prize winning books. So she was talking about this whole list of books that she had read from that. And it was like, oh, wow. I looked at the list. I've only read like 2 or 3 of them and are 93 or something books on the list so far. So that gives me a lot of books.
I'll have to think about it and get back to you. There's a story, they made it into a movie. It's about the young teenage girl who grows up in the ghetto, but she goes to a white school in the suburbs.
Oh, The Hate U Give.
Yes, I read that. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, and the movie is good too, both.
I need to watch that. I really enjoyed that book.
Yes.
So Sarah had gotten a list of, books you really should be reading right now. And that's where I got The Hate U Give and Where the Crawdads Sing and Little Fires Everywhere, actually.
Yeah, I think she's the woman who wrote, I think it's Angie Thompson or Thomas, who wrote The Hate U Give. I think there's a second book. It might be a prequel to The Hate U Give, but I have to go look again because I want to read more of her work. I felt like I was right there when I was reading that book. Yes.
And I think that's why I like stories like that, where it makes you feel like you are part of what's happening.
Right.
And I think maybe for me, it's the family relationships, because like even thinking back on TV shows or movies or things that I like, my all-time favorites, they're always about people relationships. Like my all-time favorite movie is on Golden Pond. Absolutely love that movie for many, many reasons. But then my favorite TV show is This Is Us, which is also about family relationships. And it's not about families being perfect. It's just about how their relationships play out. But then another all over the place movie is I love The Shawshank Redemption, which I usually try to watch the TBS version because it's a little less raw. But the idea of always looking for good in people, no matter where they are or who they are, or maybe even what they have done, but just the universal always looking for good. I just love that movie. I can watch it over and over and over again. Again, I'm a Morgan Freeman fan, but.
So that's a theme that you like in your books too, your movies and books.
So just the family, and then the looking for the good in people. And,
yes.
And I guess overcoming maybe things that have been tough.
Yeah. Oh, that's
I don't know.
great.
Even back when I was little, my favorite TV shows were like The Partridge Family and The Brady Bunch. Again, family.
Yes, right.
Back thinking, okay, I'm really stuck on this theme, but
that's
family's
great.
important to me, so that's probably.
Oh, that's true. It is. It's very important. Do you have anything else you want to share that I haven't asked you about?
we've already talked about, at Christmas time, we talked about the best Christmas pageant ever.
Oh, yes.
Favorite books.
Yes.
I don't know. I think stories are a way that families connect. And again, it goes back to that family theme. But, when the kids were little, we read every single night. And I have memories of my grandmother telling stories and my dad telling stories. And even now I like to listen to John, our father-in-law, talk about when he was younger and just the stories that he tells. And I just think it makes people come alive and let you see a different dimension to them.
Right.
And maybe that's why I like reading and movies, because you get to see that played out in a lot of different stories in a lot of different ways. And I always tend to like those a little better. I do like Star Wars and those kind of movies, but I think, again, for me, it's not so much the great special effects as it is the character development and the stories and the families in those situations as well. So,
right. Yes. To me, a story has to have good relationships, or at least where the people are working out their relationships, or they're depending on each other, because the character development is, to me, what the story is all about.
Exactly.
You can have the most fabulous special effects, but if there's nothing going on with the characters, then why have the story?
Why bother? Why bother?
Why bother? Right.
Have you seen, I do have a movie to recommend. Have you seen The Trial of the Chicago 7?
I have that on my list, I think, but I haven't seen it yet.
Gosh, bump it to the top. It's a wonderful, wonderful movie. And it really does a good job of character development. And it talks about a time period where I feel like I should know about that because I was alive then, but I was little. So I really don't have much of a memory of it. Mm-hmm. But as you're watching it, Mark and I watched it last night. It's one of the SAG nominated movies. Uh-huh. And so we're working our way through those. But as we were watching it last night, I'm thinking, how could this even have happened? And I know it did, but you're watching it thinking, this is not right. This is crazy. And I know things like that happened a lot, and we're just kind of not publicized that way, I guess, maybe. I'm really glad they took this event and made it into a movie, because I feel a lot more knowledgeable, or at least their perception of what happened. But it does make for a very entertaining movie.
Yes. Well, we watched Spotlight not too long ago, and I had been wanting to watch it for a long time.
I haven't seen that one.
And oh my goodness, the Boston Globe had this team of people that would spotlight things that were going on in Boston. And a new editor came to be in charge of the paper, and he wanted them to work on the whole issue of priests molesting children. And, at first they were reluctant to do that. I mean, Boston's probably a really big Catholic city, but just the whole process, and I think it took them a couple of years, but what they did just changed the world, not just Boston. So it was, oh, wow. It was really a powerful movie. Yes. And so, I like those kind of movies too, where Selma was like that too. I showed it in my dramatic structure class, but Ava DuVernay reproduced the actual footage of the first time they crossed the bridge and then they got beaten up by the police. And I was just weeping because I had seen that on the news. Mm-hmm. And, it's so hard to watch it.
I think that's one of the reasons I like Forrest Gump so much. That's also another favorite movie. Partly because I love anything Tom Hanks, but partly because I can remember some of those clips happening in my lifetime. And so, just when he's talking with President Johnson, and I don't know, just some of those things that make it really funny. I do think those movies are good at drawing people, especially in our generation, in, because it makes it more real, because we lived through some of that.
Yes, right. Yeah. Yes. Well, this has been so fun. I'm glad you agreed to do it. You said, I'm not sure I'm very interesting, but you're very interesting.
I'm very interesting, but that's okay. That's okay. It was fun. I enjoyed talking with you. Okay.
And yes, I think that teachers are highly underrated. Of course, being a teacher myself, that's why I think that. I suppose.
Yeah.
But
And I was just thinking the other day, though, it's like one of the reasons teachers are underrated is because people don't really know what they do. You don't just teach a subject. It's like you buy shoes for kids. I read something on Facebook about this teacher that taped 2 quarters underneath a student's desk every Friday. So because they were on free and reduced lunch, which meant they didn't get to buy the ice cream treat like all the other kids. And so as just part of their routine, she taped the quarters. The kid knew, she knew, nobody else knew. And it's like, those are the things that happen all over America every single day that teacher doesn't want credit for. She doesn't really want anybody to know about, but she looked at what need does this kid have? What's important to that kid and met that need. And I just think that happens all the time. And I'm sure that's true in many professions where people don't get the credit they deserve for going above and beyond. But I don't know. It's just, again, the stories, the things like that you hear that people do that you're just like, that is amazing. They just took the time to see a need and meet that need. And I just think that's really awesome. And
those are the stories people tell about teachers or people who changed their lives because they cared about them as people.
Yep.
Yeah.
Or just a subject to teach or just a class to have, but somebody to impact their lives.
Yeah, I mean, it's individuals. The classroom is filled with individuals.
Yes, and that's hard to manage sometimes.
Yeah.
I said, especially when every little individual is needing something different, that can be really tricky.
Yeah, and you've got 30 of them or however many. Yeah. Yes, right. Exactly. Well, thank you so much for talking with me. I have enjoyed it so much.
Me too. Thanks for inviting me.
I hope you enjoyed the show. If you like what you heard, please share it with a friend and give us a review on your favorite podcast app. It will help people find us. You'll find the show notes for this episode at my website, Sage Woman Chronicles at sagewoman.life. You can leave a comment there. And remember, as Philip Pullman said, after nourishment, shelter, and companionship, stories are the thing we need most in the world. Until next time, this is Lucinda Sage-Midgorden. Thanks for listening.